Good afternoon, everybody, as well as good morning and good evening. Welcome to the beginning of the second week of our Hobbit Immersion camp. We are ready to go in now that we've gotten up through Lake Town. And I have always said that Lake Town, Chapter 10, is really the in many ways, sort of the turning point of the story. There are lots of really important moments in the story, but that moment when they arrive at Lake Town is a place where the story really changes, and changes, I think, really importantly. It's when the journey is officially over and it's time to start the dragon and mountain part of the adventure. So without further preamble, I will pass you on as usual to Ms. Binkley, and I look forward to your questions here today. Don't forget to keep entering your questions there in the questions box, and we look forward to another good class. See you guys later.
Well, hello, everyone, and thanks for coming today. Today we have two really exciting and important chapters. And be sure that you ask all the questions that you need to ask, and we'll squeeze them in. And anything that is really big that we can't answer, we'll manage to get answers for you. As I know that every now and then I have to skip one because we're out of time, but we will be able to answer all your questions, I'm sure. So keep those questions coming. We're going to be talking about the chapter called On the Doorstep. This is a pretty dramatic one, and this is where we start to see Bilbo really come into his own. Now remember, Bilbo, when he started back here in Hobbiton, was a pretty shy person who really didn't want to go on this adventure. And then he kind of got swept away and off he went. And all the way along, he's been sort of questioning himself, almost like, oh, why am I doing this? And reminding himself that I miss my breakfast, I miss my comfy chair, I miss my garden, all those things. But as he makes his journey from Hobbiton here, and remember they go down the Great East Road, they have their adventure with the trolls. Then they go and get some rest in Rivendell, find the moon letters on the map. Then they're planning on going over the mountain and continuing down the Great East Road, but they ended up going under the mountains when they were captured by the goblins. They come out here, get attacked by the wargs and the goblins. The eagles come and rescue them, take them to their eyrie, transfer them to the Carrock, Beorn's house. Beorn's loans in the ponies. And remember, Beorn's the one who says, you can't really do this road. It's full of goblins and it ends in a marshy swamp now. You can't really do that. Not a good way to go. So he suggests they take the forest path, this elf path here. Now remember, Bomber falls in the enchanted stream, falls asleep. They have to carry him. And then just when they run out of food, they start seeing all sorts of lights coming on in the forest and going out. And those are the elves who are out basically having a picnic. They've been out hunting and now they're eating and just enjoying the evening. And they get approached, the company approaches them 3 times. On the 3rd time, remember, Thorin is captured, taken here to the Elven King's halls, put in a dungeon, locked up. Then they capture the rest of the company with the exception of Bilbo, because Bilbo puts on his invisibility ring and the elves never counted him, so they didn't even know he was there. So when last we met, they were, Bilbo was figuring out a way to get them out of there, and he discovered that there's a commerce, a trade system going on between the men of Lake Town and the wood elves of the Elven King's Hall. And so they ship up barrels of goods. The Elven King's family and people use those things, and then the empty barrels they send back. Bilbo discovered that and discovered a shipment was going up, empty barrels was going out, so he packs in the dwarves, boom, 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 boom. They come bubbling down here. They end up in Long Lake. They go to Lake Town, and Thorin basically announces himself that I am here, I'm the king under the mountain, I'm back. Let's roll. And everybody is so excited. They are like, oh boy, the king under the mountain is back. We're all going to get rich again. That's basically what they're thinking. They help him out. They help him pack up boats full of goods, and then they send horses around, up around this way as well, with additional supplies. Like the people of Lake Town, of Esgaroth, are really helping out the company. So they have arrived there now, and now let's talk about what they run into. They travel to the lonely mountain here, Erebor, by boat, and then they get, eventually it runs out, the lake does. They can't take boats all the way up there into the mountain. So this is what they see. These are two drawings by Tolkien, and they reach the skirts of the mountain all the same without meeting any danger or any sign of the dragon other than the wilderness he had made about his lair. The mountain lay dark and silent before them and ever higher above them. So as they come closer, the mountain just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and they're going like, okay. Now let's look at some of the details here. You can see the river running coming out. It has its source in here. Here's a broken bridge. But this Dale was the town where the men lived, and they were in close relationship with the dwarves of Erebor. They had their own trade relationship going on. The dragon comes. I like this one because it's got a little dragon on it here. The dragon comes and it lays waste to everything, just burns everything down. Villages, eats people. This one here that's in color, you can really see the front gate here, the river coming out and going back out past this desolated area with this one little charred tree here. The land used to be forested. It is not anymore. There were farms there. It probably looked a lot like Bilbo's hometown, because there would be farms, there would be little houses, there would be a city, you know, pleasant place to be till the dragon came. So anyway, here's the steam coming out from the dragons, whether or not it's steam because he's on fire or it's steam because there's water there and his heat heats the water up and turns it into steam. I'm not really too sure, but there we go, steam coming out. So anyway, the dwarves get very, very, very discouraged. This is a big mountain. And remember, on the map, it's pretty vague about where this secret door is. Here's the front door, the river running, coming out, going past a dale. And here's the desert, they call it the desolation of Smaug because he's burned everything down. And here's the secret door. And the only clue that they really have here is his finger pointing at it. Well, if you look at the Lonely Mountain, it's not real clear exactly where they're going to find that door. My guess would be, since this is the thing here, the front gate, it'd be someplace off on this side. So what happens then is the dwarves go looking. They're getting more and more and more discouraged. They're getting closer and closer to Durin's Day. Remember, they have to be there on Durin's Day. Durin's Day is when fall changes to winter. And they need to have all of that in place on Durin's Day, discovering it, have the key ready, have everything ready to go, or they're going to miss it. And who knows when it will happen again. They don't know. Is it something that happens every year, year after year after year, or is it only on this particular year? Because remember, the moon letters can only be seen on a certain time of the year, whenever the moon's the same shape and in the same location as when it was written. So talk about a prophecy, they got to get there. So they're getting pretty close to that time, and they're getting more and more and more discouraged. And then one time, Bilbo's out exploring the side and the side of the mountain, and he does find, about midday, creeping behind a great stone that stood alone like a pillar. Bilbo came and looked on. He came on what looked like rough steps going upward. So here, this artist has made this rough, kind of rugged staircase up the side of a mountain, and Bilbo finds that, and so he's thinking, wow, we're on the right path now. Now we just have to find this thing. Well, it turns out that it's not just a staircase, it's also a really narrow path. The path is so narrow that Bomber, the fattest of the dwarves, will not even go up there. He says, no, that's just way too narrow for me. I'm just too big to fit there. But they made their third camp there. So what they did was, there they made their third camp, hauling up what they needed from below with their ropes. Down the same way, they were able, occasionally to lure one of the more active dwarves. And the more active dwarves would be the ones like Fili and Kili, the young ones. So here's this narrow little path, and it goes back up in here to this little cove. So Bilbo is there, and remember back in Bag End, he said that he would sit on the doorstep and think about things. So here he is on the doorstep, and Bilbo's thinking. The dwarves are getting more and more discouraged. They don't think they're even going to get in there. They can't beat the door down. Indeed, they can barely even tell where the door is. It's just a flat slab right there. So Bilbo takes the map, Thror's map, and remember we translated the runes here. And the runes say, stand by the gray stone when the thrush knocks, and the setting sun with the last light of Durin's day will shine upon the keyhole. Okay, so Bilbo knows that translation. And remember, Bilbo's pretty good at riddles. That's how he managed to get out of the caves when Gollum was when Gollum was actually planning on eating him, but he managed to answer enough riddles to win the riddle game, even though the last one wasn't technically a riddle, but Gollum agreed. So anyway, he's thinking about this, and this is what Bilbo does. Bilbo sits and he thinks. He thinks about the moon letters and the riddle. And then he hears a thrush cracking snails on the stone. Now, a thrush is a bird like a robin. This bird here, though, is very, very black, and it has a pale yellow chest, like a robin has a red chest. This one here has a pale yellow chest. There are lots of different kinds of thrushes. But this particular thrush was sitting there on the gray stone, in the grass, was an enormous thrush, nearly coal black, its pale yellow breast freckled with dark spots. Crack. It had caught a snail and was knocking it on the stone. Crack, crack. There we are. The thrush knocks. And Bilbo puts two and two together. And then they all turn around and they look at the stone here. Now, I want you to count these dwarves with me. This is from the Rankin Bass movie from the 1970s. And yes, this is a dwarf right here. There are 13 dwarves. Remember, that's why Bilbo was included. Let's see how many dwarves we get here. 1, 2, 3. I think that's a dwarf. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Where's the 13th dwarf? They all arrived. Well, the 13th dwarf would be Bombur. And remember, said he was too fat to fit up that narrow trail. And so therefore, he was still down with the supplies and the ponies. So Bilbo hears the thrush cracking the snails, and he realizes that the thrush is knocking on the gray stone. And it is time for the door to be opened. Then suddenly their hope was low. Suddenly, when their hope was lowest, a red ray of the sun escaped like a finger through a rent, that's a tear, through a rent in the cloud. A gleam of light came straight through the opening into the bay and fell on the smooth rock face. Thorin then takes out the key and that he got with the map. And remember, I showed you the key to my apartment because it has these really intricate wards on it. And I've actually had keys to apartments that were more intricate than this one. But anyway, he takes out his key and he puts it in that keyhole that appears, and it opens. The door opens with a snap and flows out. So it opens with a snap, and then it seemed, this is right directly from Tolkien's writing, it seemed as if darkness flowed out like vapor from the hole in the mountainside. Remember, if you have any questions about the lecture today, you can ask about those. If you're not keeping up with the reading, that's okay. You can go ahead and just follow along with our talk today and ask any questions about anything we're talking about. We already read our riddle. There we're going the right way now. So hopefully you're keeping up with your journal and your drawings and your questions. We're going to take a look at these here. Sketch the company on the way to the Lonely Mountain. Now, you can be as general about this as you want. Remember, they made a very, very long journey on the way to the Lonely Mountain. They started in Hobbiton. If you want to go back and draw something that really caught your attention, that is just fine. The sketch was actually pointed towards them traveling from Lake Town to the Lonely Mountain. But this is your journal, so if there's something else in there that you really, really want to do, go ahead and make your mind movie and sketch the company on their way to the Lonely Mountain. Then we have the question, who discovered the secret door? Our second sketch, I want you to sketch the company at the secret door. Now, if you're going to put in all the dwarves, think about how many dwarves you need to have in there. Because remember, one of the dwarves stayed down below. So that is something to pay close attention to. But then again, even drawing 12 dwarves is a lot of work. And we also have the question about how did the secret door get opened? Jubilee is wondering if whenever the door came open, if there was a lot of dust as well. I think, Jubilee, after 100 years, that's going to be a dusty hallway. Now, one of the things that you have to remember is that dwarves were experts at making tunnels. And this tunnel was sealed tight with the door, so there wouldn't be any dust coming from the outside. Dust could come up from the inside where Smaug is. And the floor is level and straight and flat because that's the way dwarves made things. They were experts at making beautiful tunnels. We have a question about the opening of the door alerting Smaug. Well, actually, Smaug had heard them out there when they were banging on the door before they figured out how to open it. And he kind of remembered that there was a hole up there in his lair, a hole in one of the walls, and he never really shut it up, and he didn't and sealed it off, and he didn't really quite know why. So he did actually hear something up there. If the door is so hard to open, how did Thrain and Thor get out? Was it a spell or a different key? Lloyd has asked a really good question. You know, Lloyd, we're going to find out about opening the door here in the next few chapters and what it takes to open the door from the inside. And it was a spell that they put on it. One of the things that dwarves liked to do was whenever they made these doors, they were quite magical. And some of them you had to have a key, like this one. You have to have the key at the right time. Some of them you could open just with words, a password. And remember that this door here, passwords wouldn't work. It would only work on the right day at the right time of the year with the key. And if they say, for example, they were there and the keyhole appears and they didn't have the key, they wouldn't be able to get in. Amy's asking a question about Smaug. We're going to talk about Smaug here in our very next chapter. So let's talk about our questions, and then we'll go on to answering Amy's question about the color of Smaug. And Lloyd, I haven't forgotten your question about the spell or different key and how could they get out. We're going to be talking about that as well. Who discovered the secret door? Okay, this is, you see this here in quotes? That's directly from Tolkien's work. Suddenly understood. Bilbo suddenly understood the clues from Thorin's map when he was listening to the thrush crack snail shells on a stone on the hidden ledge. He suddenly understood, meaning he solved the riddle. There is a riddle in that. Stand by the gray stone when the thrush knocks. Everybody's like, what? So he is a good riddle solver. So basically, Bilbo's the one who discovered the secret door because he suddenly understood the riddle on the map. I have a question here. It doesn't have a name on it, but do I think the thrush knew what he was doing? You know, after we get to know this thrush a little bit better, I would not be at all surprised if that thrush wasn't waiting around, just waiting for the opportunity to help Bilbo suddenly understand the clues in the riddle. I wouldn't put that past that thrush. And how did the secret door get open? Well, this is a summary from the book on page 190 of my book. A flake of rock split from the wall and fell. Okay, so it was just a blank wall, and all of a sudden this flake of rock just goes floop, falls off. A hole suddenly appeared about 3 feet from the ground. So the keyhole is about 3 feet from the ground. The key, cried Bilbo. Where is Thorin? Then Thorin stepped up and drew the key on his chain from around his neck. He put it in the hole, it fitted, and turned. And then they pushed the door open. Now that's how you get it open from the outside. Inside information. Now we're going to talk about who's on the inside. Okay, so the door is open. And you can see in this particular drawing how regular it is. It's 5 feet high, so that would make the dwarves here, 3.5 feet, Bilbo a little bit smaller. So anyway, here's the door. It's open. Let's count the dwarves. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Did I miss one? Oh, here we go, 12. So we only have 12 dwarves in this one. So if you do draw whenever you're drawing the dwarves by the secret door, and if you're going to put all of them in there, you're only going to put in 12 for bombers down below. So the door is open. Remember, Bilbo was hired to be the burglar and go in and, I guess, steal the treasure, because that's what burglars do. They steal things. So Thorin goes into a big, long, wordy speech, and he says, now is the time for him, meaning Bilbo, to perform the service for which he was included in our company. And that means going down this tunnel. Now, the darkness, remember, came out, kind of creepy and overpowering. The air in there is going to be all stuffy, and there probably will be dust. And remember, though, the floors are smooth and it's a nice, well-built tunnel, but Bilbo still has to go in there. So Bilbo asks the company, and he says, is there anybody who wants to come in with me? Well, dwarves aren't really heroes. So no, they didn't want to come in with him. Even though it is their homeland and they're the ones who decided they wanted to go retrieve this treasure from the dragon, none of them want to go in there. But Balin, who really likes and respects Bilbo, said, I will go in with you part way. So he goes in with, Bilbo goes in, Balin accompanies him until the light from the end of the tunnel, Bilbo can see that, Balin can see that, and Balin says, look, I'm going to go back out. Good luck, basically. So Bilbo has to go on his own. Now, our narrator tells us that going on from there was the bravest thing that Bilbo ever did. Bilbo's done some pretty brave things so far. He fought the spiders. That to me was tremendous bravery. He argued his way out of trouble with Gollum. That is smart and brave. He has helped the dwarves with all sorts of things along the way. But those and everything else he did after this did not stack up to the simple movement of him walking down that tunnel alone towards the dragon. Will App wants to know if Smaug was actually covered with jewels. Well, we're going to be talking about that here in just a minute. I have some really cool pictures to share with you guys. And goblins lived in mountains and have secret doors too. So are they related to the dwarves? They are not actually related to the dwarves. But remember that magic is not just tied to any one particular race or group here. The elves had magic. The dwarves have magic. Remember that even hobbits have a simple magic. They can just disappear almost. That because they're so stealthy and quiet that if we come blundering along, they just kind of almost vanish. So everyone has some sort of magic going on in each of the races. So the goblins may have had their own magic too for their own doors, or they may have just had a system of opening and closing the doors that involved mechanics, because one of the things they were good at is building things, especially weapons of war. Ooh, Amy has a fabulous question about, are there any girl dragons? You know, I can't think of any being mentioned, Amy, but that doesn't mean that there aren't any. It's an interesting question. I've never really thought about there being girl dragons. I know there are girl dwarves, and I know there are girl hobbits. I don't know if there are any girl wizards, but I know there are female gods. So, interesting question. Jubilee is wondering if the dwarves always did make secret doors. If you're asking, Jubilee, is every door that a dwarf makes a secret door? Probably not. But I know that they were really fond of making doors that could only be opened with certain spells or keys, or apparently like this one on certain days of the year. So that is an excellent question. Nice. So let's go ahead and take a look here and see what we see. Oh dear. There we go. I titled this one Visions of Smaug. The reason why I titled it Visions of Smaug is because you're making your own mind movie as you read the words in the book. These artists that I put up here on this page and the next few pages, they are also people who read the books and made their mind movies, and then they drew these drawings. These are some of the favorite drawings from the classes that I taught. So I picked out the ones that my students liked the best, and I thought I would share them with you. Now, there was a question about, was he covered with jewels? Well, he has all of these jewels laying around here. You can see some. And here you can see all sorts of worked gold, like gold bowls and things like that. Here you can just see him laying on a big pile of gold. And here you can also see him laying on a big pile of gold. Opal wants to know why the dragon is called Smaug. I don't know why he's called Smaug. You know, Opal, you are a better Tolkien scholar than I am because I was not curious about that at all. I'm going to make a note of that question. Maybe we can talk about that on Friday. So just give me a moment. And I'm going to read to you guys now while you're looking at these pictures and thinking about him. Oh, one of the things I really like is this one. This one was probably one of the most popular ones because he's so snaky looking. Look at that. Look at that long tail, just here, skinny dragon. Here's another one that's a skinny dragon. These guys look like worms, don't they? And here's another one. Remember, they called them a worm. This one here is a little heftier. Hefty dragon. Okay, this is from the book. There he lay, a vast red gold dragon, fast asleep. A thrumming came from his jaws and nostrils and wisp of smoke, but his fires were low in slumber. Beneath him, under all his limbs and his huge coiled tail, and about him on all sides, stretching away across the unseen floors, lay countless piles of precious things, gold wrought and unwrought, gems and jewels, and silver red stained in the ruddy light. So the dragon is so red that he's actually putting off kind of a reddish light, and so everything has kind of a glow to it. Now, one of the things you might want to think about is, why do you think Smaug has caught the imagination of so many artists? You can find dozens of pictures of Smaug, and the way different people have thought about him. We are going to look at a few more ways to think about Smaug. But isn't that interesting that so many people do that? Okay, how big is the dragon? Joshua wants to know. Well, I don't think he was as big as a huge airplane. I think that he was probably a bit smaller. I don't know how many meters long it would be, and they don't really mention it. But he's big enough to crush buildings. Mira wants to know, why aren't there mostly any females in this story? Well, actually, Mira, there are no females in the story at all. We only have the dwarves and the heroes and so on. But you have to remember, this is a fairy tale that Tolkien created to tell his children as a bedtime story. And he probably just didn't see any need to put girls in there. I know that he thought girls could do pretty much anything that they set their minds to, and he really respected women. But I just think that his story, in his mind, just didn't have any girl adventurers in it. Anyway, that's what I've always thought. Will F has a question about, was there light? And if so, what was its source? And if not, how did he see Smaug? Good questions. Well, there he lay, and his fires are muted. Remember, this is a fire-breathing dragon. So he kind of is glowing, is the impression I get. Kind of a reddish glow comes off of Smaug, and that is enough for Bilbo to see by, because if you're in a pitch black place like that, even the smallest amount of light is going to look really, really bright. And remember, there's no other light coming in except what's coming off of Smaug. So he probably looks pretty bright. Just going through the questions. These are wonderful questions. Keep asking. Is Smaug related to the wereworms? Joshua wants to know. Well, I don't think we have any definition of what the wereworms actually were. I think they were in the east of East, which I've heard people say over the years could be China. And China has kind of dragons are very powerful in the Chinese culture. So I don't know if that's what Bilbo was talking about, if he maybe heard about Chinese dragons and called them were-dragons. Interesting question. Lee would like to know, what was the withered heath? What was it like, and what was it like before the dragons were there? When did the dragons arrive, and where did they come from? Is there any mention of these in other Tolkien's books? Well, Lee, in the Silmarillion, they do talk about some of the dragons, and I don't recall in the appendices. That's something we can ask Professor Olson about, if there's something mentioned about other dragons. But the dragons came from the north, I do believe, and Smaug was a fairly young dragon. I think he was trying to make a name for himself. And the withered heath, and a heath is low-growing plants, like you would see in a bog or a marsh. So they wouldn't have a lot of tall trees in them. It's not like a forest. It's just kind of like really low-growing plants. And so the withered heath would have been the low-growing plants that Smaug had burned whenever he did his great destruction. Let's see, what was it like before, and what was it like before the dragons were there? Well, I imagine that the heath would have been just beautiful rolling low hills of beautiful but shrubby small plants. In Alaska, we have stuff that we call alpine tundra, and that's actually a type of heath. It's just really small plants because they can't really grow very big because they're up too high in the mountains and too far north. And they're just, you know, nice little cushy kind of plants. And so the dragon, when Smaug came, he actually burned all that, but also he burned the forest. So there were forests that he burned down as well. And mentioned in the other books about the dragons. We talked about that. Really good questions, Lee. So the dragons were in the north. As for whenever they arrived, I do not know if that is in Tolkien's Tale of Years. There is a section where you can actually see when certain things happen, but a lot of it is whenever wars happened and when people were born and people died. And Jubilee would like to know if it was hot in the cave where Smaug lay. I imagine it felt pretty warm in there because, number one, he's a fire-breathing dragon, and number two, there's no way for any heat to escape except out that front door. And remember, we saw in Tolkien's own drawing that there was that steam coming out. Joshua wants to know about Gundabad. And is it important at all? Whenever we talk about the battle of 5 armies, we'll talk about Gundabad. And yes, it is important. It is an orc city, and it's to the north in the Misty Mountains, I think, or maybe it's in the Iron Hills. I'd have to look at the map again. And we have another question here from Mira. Exactly how long has Smaug been in the mountain? Around 100 years. Or was it longer? More than 100 years. So that doesn't exactly answer your question since you asked me exactly. So I'd have to look that up. And Jubilee also wants to know how far was the cave where Smaug was to the dwarves' location. The dwarves, remember, are at the secret door up on the mountainside. And Bilbo walks down the tunnel and then sees him, because he's right now, all he's doing is seeing Smaug. Let's move ahead here. Now, Smaug, Bilbo looks at Smaug, who appears to be sleeping. Now, oh, we already asked. So Bilbo goes sneaking in, and he steals a cup. He gets the biggest one that he can carry, a big golden cup. He grabs that, and he sneaks away. And he sneaks back up the path, the tunnel, back up to the dwarves. And he says, look, I got this. And they are all like, yay, you're a wonderful burglar. One of the things I do want to point out, though, before we move from this one here, here's another person's idea of how Smaug looks. And see, you can see steam coming out while he's sleeping. Well, so Smaug is asleep. And he has this dream, and he has an uneasy dream in which a warrior, altogether insignificant in size, but provided with a bitter sword and great courage, figured most unpleasantly. Well, if he's dreaming about Bilbo, Bilbo's small in size, all right. He does have a bitter sword. Sting is a bitter sword, just ask those spiders. And he does have great courage, because remember, the bravest thing he ever did was simply to walk down that tunnel. So he's quite brave. So then Smaug wakes up. So Bilbo's back up in the little hidden cove with the dwarves, and they're all, yay, you got something. And Smaug wakes up. Immediately, boom, he knows his cup is gone. Because even though he has this huge hoard that is basically uncountable, dragons know, apparently, exactly where everything is when it comes to their treasure. Find that interesting, but they apparently do. So Smaug decides he has to, that he knows now that somebody has come through that little hole he never got around to blocking up for some reason, and he is angry. So he comes out and he attacks the mountain. He does not know where the other end of that little opening is, but he attacks the mountain. And things go flying and rocks are exploding and so on and so forth. And then Bilbo tells everybody, come on, let's get in the tunnel now so that we don't get burned. And yes, indeed, he flies by and scorches the side of the mountain. And fortunately, they're inside the tunnel, so they're safe. But then he goes, Smaug goes off, and he chases down and eats ponies, you know, their little horses, and so on and so forth. And then Smaug comes back in the cave. All right, so he's in the cave again. I think I've answered all of our questions so far. I'm trying to keep up with you guys. You ask such good questions. So he doesn't find the company. So they decide that they are going to, Bilbo has to go back in again. So he's been down there once, time two. So in he goes. And he has a conversation with Smaug. This time, whenever he goes in, he has his ring on, and he says to Smaug, starts having a conversation with him. Smaug says, come, I know you're there. I can feel you. He can't see him, but he can tell he's there. He says, take whatever you want, you know, just being a friendly, happy dragon. Oh, there's lots to share, lots to go around. Here you go. He's trying to find out about Bilbo. Well, here is Tolkien's drawing of Smaug sitting on the pile of treasure. And you see here, this is Bilbo invisible. Now, Mr. Naismith does one that's really transparent down here, and I think this is a very clever way to show he's invisible. Because how do you draw an invisible person? You got to think something. How are you going to show that? So here are two ways that I thought were very, very clever. So anyway, Bilbo has a conversation with Smaug, and he speaks to Smaug in riddles, which pleases Smaug. Apparently, this is how you talk to a dragon. So if you're ever in where you have to talk to a dragon, riddles are apparently the way to go. And so he gives himself all sorts of names like Barrel Rider and the person who buries his friends alive and pulls them out again because he puts them in the barrels. And he is, you know, kind of like describing his trip, you know, with all of these riddles that he's saying. And then the dragon, you know, gets kind of bored with everything, and he's thinking about just, you know, eating somebody. And Smaug says, you know, really, I'm not here for the treasure. We're here for revenge. Revenge, thinks Smaug. Who's going to get revenge on me? I'm a fire-breathing dragon, dude. Didn't you notice? And then Smaug also tells, because he knows that those are dwarves out there that have been riding that pony, because whenever he ate ponies, he could tell the dwarves had been there. So anyway, he starts telling Bilbo all sorts of things about the dwarves and about how they're going to cheat him. And he starts luring him under the dragon's spell, because dragons, apparently, if you're not careful, can put you under a spell. So Bilbo almost falls for this, and he almost is under the dragon's spell, but he manages to pull himself out. And then he starts to flatter the dragon, telling him how handsome he is and how he's heard that they have wonderful armor on them and that's impenetrable. And Smaug wants to show off because apparently it's easy to flatter a dragon. And this artist here draws a very nice picture where you can see whenever he stands up and shows off his belly all armored with hard dragon scales and jewels, that there's a little gap here right in the left armpit, right there. So where was Bomber when Smaug ate the ponies? Oh, Helen, I forgot to mention that. They dropped the rope down and they managed to pull Bomber up. And so he was in the tunnel as well. Oh, thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, I kind of forgot that whenever I was talking about it. I didn't have it in my lesson plan notes either. I'm just glancing at it. Oh no, Miss Binkley forgot. So Will and Alan both were asking that same question. Good observation, guys. You guys keep me honest. So anyway, Bomber was down with the ponies and they did throw the rope down and pulled him up. And I think they also pulled up Feely or Keely because there were some other dwarves down there as well, and they all hide in the tunnel, but they don't shut the door. Okay? So anyway, Bilbo, while he's riddling, says one thing when he talks about being a barrel rider, because remember he was riding on the top of the barrels whenever they made their escape out of the Elven King's halls, because he couldn't get in a barrel because there was nobody to put him in one. So he was just hanging on the top. So anyway, Smaug has had enough. He singes Bilbo. All of a sudden he burst out with fire, and here's a picture of this person's idea of what Bilbo looks like running, and here's another one of belching forth really different looking dragons. So anyway, the dragon spouted terrific flames after him, and fast though he sped up the slope, he had not gone nearly far enough to be comfortable before the ghastly head of Smaug was thrust against the opening behind. And then Bilbo says to himself, "Never laugh at live dragons, you fool," he said to himself. And it became a favorite saying of his later and passed into proverb. "You aren't nearly through this adventure yet," he added, and that was pretty true as well. So even though he does escape up the tunnel, he gets all singed, like the hair on the back of his head's burned and his feet are burned. Terrible. Poor Bilbo. So anyway, he gets up there and he tells the dwarves about the hole in Smaug's armor. And guess who's there listening? Our friend the thrush. And Bilbo doesn't like that, so he kind of throws a rock at the thrush, like, "Get away from me, bird." And the bird just kind of flumps away and comes back and listens some more. So anyway, the thrush is hanging out. So I think the thrush is one, someone asked earlier, did the thrush know what it's doing? Yep, I think the thrush did. So anyway, Bilbo is afraid for the Lake Town men because of his barrel rider comment, and the barrels go to Lake Town. And he tells the dwarves this, and the dwarf says, "Well, really, there's nothing we can do about it. You know, we're up here, and we can't get back to Lake Town to warm them because it's several days' trip. And that is a flying dragon, as well as flame breathing." Let's see what kind of questions we have coming in here. Amy's wanting to know, how hot is Smaug's fire breath? Amy, his breath would be hot enough to burn a building down. We're going to see that in tomorrow. And Lee wants to know, how does this dragon spell affect things? Well, what it does is it kind of lulls you, if you're listening to the dragon, it lulls you into believing what the dragon is saying. And I think that he probably, if Bilbo hadn't been able to shake off the dragon the spell, that the dragon could have lured him to come closer and to tell him where the dwarves were, and to tell him, you know, about the Lake Town and the Elven people, and basically tell him everything he knew. And then he could have either eaten him or incinerated him, because dragons do eat people. Amy wants to know, why didn't the company go and kill Smaug straight away if they were ready? Well, Amy, they really weren't ready. They did not come prepared in any way, shape, or form to kill a dragon, because Gandalf says at the beginning of the book that you need a warrior to kill a dragon. He couldn't find any warriors, so he got the next best thing, which was a burglar. So Bilbo, and said Bilbo was the burglar, and brought Bilbo along to deal with things. And Bilbo, you know, even with his little knife, is not going to be able to take on a dragon. And Bilbo's not a warrior. And the dwarves are not warriors either. They're actually craftsmen. We're going to find out that, yes, indeed, they're very, very brave, but they're still makers of things. They're not warriors either. Let's see what else. Dragon spells. Jubilee'd like to know that after Bilbo returns to the dwarves, he is spooked. Were the dwarves concerned about Bilbo? Yes, they were, Jubilee. Good question. They tried to make him feel better because he has been injured. He's been burned by the dragon fire. So while he's up there talking to them, and the thrushes, and telling them about the conversation he'd had with them about what was going on down there, and the thrush was listening, they were very kind to him. Now, on this next one here, you're going to get to see some more ideas of what people think about Smaug. Like I said, there are, oops, here we go. There are lots and lots and lots of opinions about how Smaug looked, and here are 3 more artists with pictures of Smaug. So Bilbo is really uncomfortable. That conversation he had with Smaug, he knows Smaug is up to something, and he figures that the up to something is finding us and killing us. So he persuades the dwarves to go into the tunnel. So they all enter into the tunnel. They take all their supplies, pull everything in, and they want to leave the door open because, as we were asked earlier, can you open it from the inside? They don't think they can open it from the inside. They don't know what mechanism they use to open the door from the inside, whether it takes a key or a magic word or what, but whatever it is, they don't have it. So anyway, Bilbo says, no, you have to come in, and we have to shut the door. We don't have a choice. So Smaug, what he does is he exits the Lonely Mountain and he flies way up to the top, and then he floats down so they don't hear him coming. And I'll read to you this passage from the book. They had hardly gone any distance down the tunnel when a blow smote the side of the mountain like a crash of battering rams made of forest oaks and swung by giants. The rock boomed. The walls cracked and stones fell from the roof on their heads. What would have happened if the door had still been open, I don't like to think. They fled further down the tunnel, glad to be still alive. While behind them, outside, they heard the roar and rumble of Smaug's fury. He was breaking rocks to pieces, smashing wall and cliff with the lashings of his huge tail, till their lofty camping ground, the scorched grass, the thrush's stone, the snail-covered walls, the narrow ledge, and all disappeared in a jumble of smithereens, and an avalanche of splintered stones fell over the cliff into the valley below, because Smaug found the other opening to the tunnel, and he definitely closed it up. So here we have this one here with the flames reaching around. That is a fire-breathing dragon. I like this one as well. I like the way the flames are coming off here. And here you can just imagine him scorching inside. And this one here, Mr. Lee, looks like he is, you can see the rocks being smashed to a jumble of smithereens in this one, while he's just beating the mountains to shreds. Amy's wondering, if someone was burned, would it kill them? And could a dragon burn themselves? I think dragons are probably fireproof. But If someone was burned, and like Bilbo, when he was running up there, it was just the flames that licked his feet and the back of his head. But yeah, if you were standing right there smack dab in front of a dragon, you'd probably be burnt toast. Make sure that we don't miss any questions here. Oh, I did miss one. Jubilee was wondering, how often does Smaug eat? Well, I know that whenever he attacked the Lonely Mountain, it said that he ate lots and lots and lots of dwarves. And maybe that was why he couldn't close up that thing. So maybe he couldn't close up that little opening because he was too fat from eating dwarves. I don't know that they have to eat every day, but I do know that also he ate the ponies, so he'd eat animals as well. So maybe he just went out and ate, like, you know, wild animals whenever he was hungry. But I don't know that it ever talks about that Tolkien ever talks about how much food it takes to feed a dragon. Okay, let's see. So anyway, what happens next is that Smaug is satisfied that he has closed up that bothersome hole. And if there were any dwarves there, that they're cooked. And probably that little thing there that was talking to him, that would be Bilbo. So let's take a look at our journal activities. I want you to sketch Smaug on his bed of treasure. We've seen a lot of really interesting drawings, and I'll bet you guys can come up with some really interesting ones as well. But take a look at the drawings that we saw, but then also remember to reread the description so that you get your mind movie going and put that in your journal. Answer the question, what did the dwarves want Bilbo to do now? They're always wanting him to do something, it seems. And then sketch Smaug destroying the secret door. That would be an exciting one to draw. And then the last question for us today is, what did Bilbo discover about Smaug's armor? So let's take a look at our answers. What did the dwarves want Bilbo to do now? The dwarves wanted Bilbo to enter the passage of the secret door and burgle the dragon, because that's what Thorin said. Whenever they got the door open, he says, now you get to do what you came here to do. And that's go down in there and steal things. And then, what did Bilbo discover about Smaug's armor? Smaug bragged to Bilbo that he was fully armored above and below with iron scales and hard gems. Bilbo discovered that there was a large patch in the hollow of his left breast, as bare as the snail out of its shell. And that's pretty bare. Let's take a look and see if there are any other questions before the end. We're just about out of time. Lee has a question here. I know that in other books, dragons have been killed, but how? Well, I think that's up to the individual author who's writing the book to determine how dragons will meet their demise. Tomorrow we're going to find out what happens with Smaug, and that's kind of an exciting chapter to go through as well. Taking a quick look to see if there are any questions that I missed. And we will talk about the secret door. And how can they get out tomorrow. And also we'll find out why he was named Smaug. If I can find that out, I will let you know. So thank you so much for coming today. Yeah.
Hey, can I say one quick thing?
Sure.
I just one, and I know we're out of time. But I just wanted to point out one really fun thing, because I might forget to say it on Friday. Thinking back to chapter 11 and the rune letters on the map, right? The secret instructions about the door. Just the thing that interests me so much about those is that when you think about them, they're kind of surprising, right? What you would expect, it sounds like the instructions like you might find on a treasure map, right? And you think about those kinds of instructions. Those kinds of instructions are things like, you know, stand here and then walk this many paces this way and then do this other thing. And when you do all these things, that's where the treasure is found, or that's where you will find the door, right? And it starts like that with an instruction, stand by the gray stone. Right? So it makes it sound like it's going to be a set of instructions that you use to find the door. But after that first part, stand by the gray stone, the rest of it is not instructions. The rest of it is a prediction of what's going to happen, right? Stand by the gray stone, and then when the thrush knocks, and the last light of the setting sun of Durin's day will shine upon the keyhole. That's just a prediction. Like, this is what's going to happen. And remember the way that it happens, right? With the clouds and the one little finger, one little ray of light, like a finger pointing to the door, points in. How could the people who made them, you know, how could Thror or Thrain know that was going to happen, right? So what we actually say at first, the moon letters sound like instructions on how to find the door, but really, when you think about them a little bit more and you see what actually happens, you see it's not actually instructions. It's more like a prophecy of what's going to happen, which begins to make their discovery of the secret door and their entrance into the dragon's home, and, you know, the dragon's mountain. Well, their own mountain, of course, begins to make it sound more like fate and destiny than simply the kind of treasure hunt that they were talking about at the beginning. So that's something that really struck me when I was reading The Hobbit, back when I was writing my book, that I found really, really fascinating. So I just wanted to share that a little bit with you today. But okay, I'll let you guys go, and we can talk more about this stuff later. Please do, if you have any questions. Also, and to those of you who are watching this on our YouTube channel who couldn't attend our regular time, if you guys have other questions that come up while you're watching and you would like to ask, please go ahead and send those by email if you'd like to camp@signumu.org, and we will make sure to pass those along, and we can get some of those answers as well. So yeah, very good. Oh, and yes, Joshua, I did write a book on The Hobbit. It's called Exploring J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit. It's a chapter by chapter discussion of The Hobbit. So if you would like to dig into The Hobbit even more after camp, you could get a copy of my book, and I have a lot more to say about a bunch of stuff in there. So anyway, all right, thanks everybody. See you guys tomorrow.
Good night.